couple months ago, I went down to my storage unit and I opened up the bins filled with Jacob Frejaz's Odyssey Karma. What I found in there astonished me. And out of those materials, I put together these 5 new releases for you. Principally, our long-lost studio masterpiece, Winterwood, which has been hiding out in the vault, unheard for these dozen years. And in celebration of that finally getting released, there's also 4 newly produced live albums for you. One that focuses on songwriting, one that focuses on improv, one that focuses on tradition, and one that focuses on intensive collaboration. These represent the 4 types of evolution that we had to go through to eventually be ready to make the Winterwood album, which to me was the crown on the whole thing. But before it could be released, I left the group. So it's waited until now. That's my story of it, anyway. All of it seems improbable in hindsight. It's highly improbable that we made it out of Tulsa, Oklahoma in the first place. We were kids when we started playing shows together. And I mean kids. A bunch of insanely ambitious and freaky kids in a very conservative Midwestern town. There were 8 of us then. 3 horns, 4 MCs, 2 percussionists, guitar, Fender Rhodes, and bass. It was mostly originals with some Prince covers thrown in and riffs from the JBs. We would split up to make sure our posters covered every telephone pole and shop window in the city. We got lucky with this one club that had a pretty loyal all-ages punk rock scene. They welcomed us with open arms right away. All they cared about was if you brought the ruckus, if you brought the energy. So that kind of became our specialty. Go big or go home. It was lots of costume contests, dance-offs, freestyle battles, house parties, street parties, pajama jammy jams. The recipe was bizarre, but it generated a lot of energy, and I think people found that contagious. We opened for MMW a few times in the Midwest, and boom, that was it. We knew what we had to do. We hit the road. We called every club that Medeski had played in the previous year, and we didn't take no for an answer. Which meant way too many dudes in one van, trailer full of instruments, driving in shifts, packed like sardines in the back. New York was 24 hours, Chicago was 12 hours, Austin was 8, Seattle was 30. Our biggest strength was that we had multiple frontmen, so we could become several different sounding bands depending on the vibe in the crowd. We fared pretty well in cities like Detroit and San Francisco that had a lot of music history. But in some of the college towns, not so much. We brought with us a sort of a Revenge of the Nerds vibe, and it led to some pretty confused and angry Greeks. For the first big trip to New York City, we held the 500 family garage sale to cover tour costs. When we got to New York, we shared the bill with a super nice band from New Orleans. It was their first show in New York, too. Every dime we made went either to the van or the posters. We scored a record deal with a label we liked from Boston. We even started getting some kind of heavy national press. And for a minute there, it looked like things were about to really, really get going. Then we lost Sean to suicide. He was a heavy cat, the heaviest. The kind of person who is having such a profound experience of their universe that it spills over into the people around them and makes all their lives profound too. So losing him like that was weird. He was pretty much our best player and most visionary composer. It was devastating. We resolved to keep going without him. One by one, over the next year, the original lineup fell away. Pretty soon, there were just 3 of us. It made a lot of sense. And that's when we really hit the road. That one tour would stretch on mile after mile for 19 straight months. As a trio, the grooves widened out and the sound completely focused on Brian's volcanic, ecstatic Rhodes piano. To fill the vacuum left by the missing horn solos, I got an octave pedal, and the bass could now double as soprano. And we kept up a steady pace of 25 cities a month. We allowed the changes to come over us, and we became new. When Brian's brother Richard took over for Edwards on the kit, we didn't even take a week off to teach him the tunes. We camped in state parks so we wouldn't have to pay for hotels. I stopped paying rent any place back home. The van was bedroom, kitchen, wheatgrass farm, music school, and meditation dojo. We got our first taste of Jamband festivals, and we discovered that we liked them. We bonded instantly with the Benevento Russo duo and Sound Tribe Sector 9, Skerrick and Mike Dillon, and a band that would massively affect our approach in the coming years, The Slip. Little by little, one show at a time, a community was forming itself around our little punk jazz wheatgrass cult. Then suddenly, it was time to find a new drummer again. We had no break in the tour, and we had no idea what to do. It was at that moment that we had perhaps our greatest single stroke of luck. With Jason, everything fell into balance. It was as if he'd been sent specifically for us. And that's when we really hit the road. The music got weirder, groovier, hotter. We had been a band for 8 years, and now, with Jason, we were truly just beginning. The festivals that summer went off like nothing we had ever experienced. It truly felt like a brand new band. We worshipped wheatgrass, cannabis, and redwood trees. And we knew how to put the devil in the room. It was an unrelenting cycle of driving and finding places to crash, refining our approach, promoting, composing, changing, evolving. Back in Tulsa, we had theaters and art galleries to rehearse in, and all 3 of us started churning out tunes. It was amazing to hear Brian play grand pianos all the time instead of the Rhodes. In fact, we liked it so much, we gave our booking agent a new quest: find us rooms with pianos. Playing quietly after 9 years of blasting off was like a revelation. And for a while, our shows were full of old jazz tunes and meditative silences. But the dragon side of us was only hibernating in preparation for what was to come. We could feel that we were getting close, but there was always something we couldn't put our finger on that was holding us back from something. We couldn't quite tell what. As we reached the milestone of 10 years together as a band, we started to figure out what it was. So here's where we get to the 4 new live albums. The Spark That Bled was recorded on tour in 2005, and it focuses on songs and songwriting. There's 3 originals. These were like the backbone of our live show. Daily Wheatgrass Shots Are Burning a Brand New Pathway Through My Brain, Tomorrow Will Know Today, and Santiago. One written by Brian, one by Jason, and one by me. But our main focus that year wasn't actually composing. The big quest that year involved covers, but very strategically chosen covers. Chosen because of what each one could teach us. Each cover we picked forced us to get better at something that was hard for us. Plus, the process of taking Flaming Lips, Beatles, Neil Young, and Bjork and turning them into instrumental jungle gems actually taught us a lot about who we were and what we were good at, in a way that originals never could. By the end of that year, we had turned from a floodlight into a laser. At one point in this process, we did attempt a bunch of these tunes in the studio, with legendary producer Joel Dorn at the helm. It was an incredible honor to work with him. But we had one day in the studio, and the van and trailer got towed in the middle of the session, which in Manhattan is no joke. Musically, the results we got that day were pretty tame and one-dimensional, when the same tunes had been ragers every night on tour. Luckily, we toured with this amazing sound engineer, Jason Kreutzmann, who expertly recorded every single night. So now, thanks to him, we proudly present to you The Spark That Bled. The second of the new live albums is called 9 Improvisations. 9 show-opening improvs. We began pretty much every show that way. Blank slate, tabula rasa. Back in the day, we used to call it Welcome Home. You walk out on stage, slow down your breathing, take your hands off the wheel, and you just start playing. A random chord would be struck. Someone else would strike a melody note. The groove would appear slowly like a rising sun. And pretty soon, music. It was a risky way to start the show. It asked a lot of us, and it asked a lot of the audience. But that level of vulnerability can really work, too. It can be contagious. There's just no way to fake or simulate that feeling. And we could never have written music that sounded like this. It just isn't possible. This music came from the deep end of the unconscious mind, and the unconscious minds of everyone that showed up. Past and the future gets sucked right out of the room. Every note sends the shock of fight or flight through your nervous system, until gradually you come to accept that this process can't hurt you. And it's only music. The audience has your back, your teammates have your back, and on a good night, you literally can't miss. The 9 show opening improvs I chose for this live album are my favorites out of the 50 or so I checked out. It feels good to share them. These are the real thing. I hope you like them. We went to Europe in 2006. We did a whirlwind tour of concert halls and jazz festivals. This tour required us to evolve even further. Brian and I had both grown up playing classical music, and there was something about the atmosphere in those rooms, the stillness. Every move is exaggerated. The distance between loud and soft suddenly feels like a distance of miles. The experience changed us, unlocked something. We became, like, graceful. There's a lot of complicated karma with playing traditional jazz these days. For most people, you either imitate and reenact the past, or you decide you're an innovator and rebel. We'd already tried both those roads when we were younger, and they're both creative dead ends. But there's this middle way, futuristic music that contains all of its ancestral sounds. We were looking to Monk, Coltrane, Bird, Miles, Ellington, Armstrong. Those guys are all perfect examples of creating and manifesting the future while still sounding like where they came from. Amazing. I remember us really feeling like ambassadors of an Oklahoma lineage. That was a good feeling. So that tour helped us to let go of some of that rebellion stuff. And it showed us that our dialect totally held up under all that silence. There's some Thelonious Monk tunes in here, and some Wayne Shorter, Jason's original tune, Walking with Giants, and my favorite original tune of Brian's, which is Lola and Alice. These recordings came out so well. All those rooms from Amsterdam to Venice were literally designed for recording acoustic music. So it's with great pride that we present to you Speak No Evil. In January 2007, Tulsa experienced the worst ice storm in a century. The ice brought down the trees, and the trees brought down the power. For 2 weeks, pretty much all of Tulsa was dark and freezing. Not us, though. We were super cozy on the top floor of this spooky old empty warehouse downtown with the genius producer known as Tae Meyulks. I'm not sure how it happened, but that collaboration resulted in an instrumental concept album about middle school. One day at middle school with his son, Little Tae. We had song titles like Scuffle in the Hall, Tetherball Triumph, The Votes Are Counted. Tae Meyulks took a pile of our riffs and constructed this massive sound sculpture inside his mysterious digital realm. It was magical. Right as this was happening, Jason moved on, headed back to Cincinnati. The time had come for him to disengage, which was fine, but it left us once again in Tulsa without a drummer. Literally as if on cue, this young kid moves to town. He's coming from Seattle, but he's lived all over, New York, Atlanta. He'd grown up drumming in church, and he spoke a rhythmic dialect that was pretty new to me. Freaking exciting. Josh Raymer appeared like the angel Gabriel, telling us Jason Smart was one of his favorite drummers of all time. Coincidentally, it wasn't just him that had moved back. One of the most badass musicians ever to come from Oklahoma is this dude, Pete Tomshani. He showed up at our rehearsal space with a ton of instruments, having transcribed our entire unplayable Tae Meyulks concept album. He had each piece written out in these cryptical charts and graphs, and we were like, please show us how to play our new album. He hands me his lap steel and a slide and says, go to town. He's on a flying V. Haas is playing the bass lines with his brand new synth bass. Raymer is somehow able to sound like sampled drums when he's just on a normal kit. So for example, Tomshani took this and changed it to this, which became this. For the first time in our life, we had a scripted set we believed in enough to present intact every night, like a storyline. And for this anniversary deluxe edition, I pulled together recordings of us performing Lil Tay Rides Again in Portland, Denver, New Orleans Jazz Fest, and Lincoln Center in Manhattan. And I spliced them all into one super performance. I even got Tae Meyulks himself to do the final mastering. So it makes me very proud to present to you Lil Tay Rides Again. High up in the Ozark Mountains, there's a place known as Beaver Lake. And perched on a ridge overlooking that lake is Winterwood, my favorite recording studio in the world. It felt like reaching the summit after a 14-year climb up. We were ready to do it for real, and we knew it. The game went like this. We'd start each recording with Brian unaccompanied on a grand piano. Super simple, dynamic, stark, emotional. I stand near the foot of the piano, and if he looked up wanting direction, I'd sort of conduct him on to the next section of the tune. In that way, it was almost like playing duets. We called these the conductor takes for that reason, but also because of what would happen next. The electric trio, drums, bass, Rhodes, would then play on top of that, using it as a guide. So, letting the dynamics and expressions of the solo piano performance be our conductor. And we got to be a rhythm section. Then we took it a step further. Every time an instrument would get added on, that person would be conducted through the overdub by another band member. So every layer was like a duet. We took turns. It was quite possibly the most magical week I have ever spent. I took the tracks home and I dove deep into the laptop. I wanted it to sound really detailed, like the way a Wes Anderson movie looks. I hid Easter eggs all throughout that probably no one outside the band will ever notice. But I can tell you where one is. At the end of the last song, there's like one more chorus, and this high-up guitar sort of sings the words, "I love you," and then, "I will always love you." It's cheesy, I know, but I really love Jacob Fred music. Then the big final chord strikes and begins to fade out. First, the drums and cymbals fade away, which symbolized to me the new drummer. Then the guitar fades away, which is me, leaving only the grand piano still ringing, alone, the last of the original lineup on the Jacob Fred Jazz Odyssey stage. It was my time to go. New players came into the fold with new music. And overnight, the Winterwood album was quite literally irrelevant to the next evolution of the band. So, it's been hibernating for about a dozen years. And now, finally, it is my very great honor to present to you Winterwood. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you all enjoy it.